Today, I want to share a story that is as haunting as it is real, a story that still sends shivers down my spine every time I think about it. You see, I seldom talk about these unexplainable experiences, these encounters with the paranormal. But something about tonight feels different, as if the darkness itself is urging me to unburden my soul. To begin, I must tell you what I do for a living. I'm a coffin digger. It's a job that's not for the faint of heart, but for me, it never seemed all that frightening. Over time, I came to see corpses as nothing more than remnants. What's there to fear? Dead bodies can't hurt us. It's the living, the ones still breathing, the ones whose eyes dart nervously who can cause harm. That's what I believed. After some years, I was perfectly fine being surrounded by corpses. As the years passed, I grew accustomed to the faces of the dead. Each corpse, though lifeless, carried a unique expression, a silent testament to the life that had been lived. Some faces were serene, peaceful, as if they'd been at peace with the world, content and free of regret. Others had the look of greed, the furrowed brows of a person who had never quite satisfied their hunger, whether it was for power, love, or ambition. And then there were those with faces devoid of any expression at all, blank, as if they had no story to tell, as if their lives were nothing but a void. Over the years, I had become skilled at reading them. It was like a quiet game I played with myself, guessing the life that lay behind each face. It made the work bearable. It made it easier. Being an orphan, I didn't have anyone to go home to, no family to care for, so my life revolved around my work. I would dig graves, bury the dead, and then return to my small, empty home at night. It was a lonely existence, but it was mine. I was content of this life. One particular evening, I had just finished an unusually long day. I had dug up about 13 corpses that day. 13. It felt like a number that shouldn't have existed, a number that left a cold mark in the pit of my stomach. So many souls claimed by death on the same day. And yet, there I was, grinning to myself, tired, but satisfied with my work. It felt like any other day. But that evening was different. I had planned to meet a friend, a man who owned a farm on the outskirts of town. We'd agreed to meet up at the local bar, a small, run-down place where he liked to drink. I didn't drink much myself, but I didn't mind keeping him company while he had his wine. It was a quiet evening, or at least, that's what I thought. After we had a few drinks, we decided to head back. He offered to drop me off on his two-wheeler, which was the only vehicle he owned. By now, it was around p.m., but the night seemed to have fallen faster than usual. It was as though the sun had been swallowed by the horizon in an instant, leaving only an oppressive early darkness in its wake. We rode along the bumpy, uneven road that wound its way through the countryside, the air thick with an unsettling chill. As we rode, I noticed something strange. The bike's headlight was out. Apparently, someone had crashed into it earlier in the week, and no matter how many times we tried to fix it, the light refused to shine. It was a minor inconvenience, one I had become accustomed to over time, but on that night, with the darkness pressing in on all sides, it felt wrong. The road ahead of us seemed endless, swallowed by the shadows, the only sounds the hum of the engine and the occasional rattle of gravel under the tires. My friend didn't seem to notice. He was too focused on navigating the road, his eyes squinting into the thickening darkness. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The air felt heavier than usual, thicker, as if it was pressing down on us from all sides. The further we rode, the more it felt as though we were being watched. But I didn't say anything. I just stayed quiet, my thoughts racing, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. And then, just as I was about to ask him to stop for a break, I saw it a flicker at the edge of the road, a shadow that moved in the corner of my eye. I turned my head quickly, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the trees, the long branches twisting like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. But the feeling that we were not alone persisted. It clung to me, suffocating me as we continued down the road into the blackness. Everything that day was quiet and whispery. The air felt unusual, heavy, and full of something I couldn't place. To clear my thoughts, I started talking to him. The leisure talk was comforting at first, but the atmosphere remained oppressive. As we rode further, the silence of the road was shattered by faint whispers low, indecipherable murmurs that seemed to come from all around us, rising from the trees, swirling in the air. They were not words, but something deeper, more primal, like the forest itself was speaking, its voice a mix of dry leaves and soft wind. I strained to hear, but the sounds slithered away, as if they were purposely avoiding comprehension. Every time I tried to focus, the whispers seemed to scatter, slipping into the shadows, only to return, now behind us, then ahead, always just out of reach. Then, something strange caught my eye. Bits of charcoal were scattered across the road, glowing faintly like dying stars. They shimmered in the dark, their flickering embers sending out an eerie, unnatural light. At first, I thought they were remnants of a long-forgotten campfire, a sign of life in this desolate place. But as we drew closer, the embers shifted. They moved in subtle patterns, reaching their alive, coiling into shapes too intricate to make sense of before dissolving the moment my eyes tried to fixate. Each ember seemed to pulse with energy, beating in sync with the rapid flooding of my heart. The warmth they radiated was impossible to elude. When I reached out to touch one, my fingers brushed against something cold. My breath caught in my throat. We pressed on, and that so quick. 3 fire torches flickered in the distance, and flames came from the opposite areas, as a predator stalking its prey. Their light was real, unnatural too sharp, too still. The air in the room felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. We had barely started moving forward when we saw our figures slowly advancing, their steps as measured as intertwines. Then, escaped their lips, not a glance exchanged. Their faces were blank slates, pale and frozen, like mannequins that had forgotten the art of emotion. A sickening chill crawled down my spine as we passed them. Their empty faces were its imaginary presence. The feeling of being watching their eyes that did not really settle over me, suffocating. My friend, voice barely a whisper, said, "Don't stop. Just keep going." And the worst was yet to come. As we neared the graveyard, I noticed it at first faint, then undeniable crimson glow flickering in the distance. It was as if the earth itself was bleeding, the ground torn open, spilling out a sickly glowing light. The glow pulsed in time with my heartbeat, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to call to me, beckoning me closer. And in that blood-red light, I saw shapes, figures. They hovered above the ground, their forms distorted, flickering in and out like mirages in the heat of summer. Their outlines shimmered unnaturally, as if they were not fully real, but more like shadows trying to escape their own existence. I could feel my stomach tighten, nausea rising in waves. This was no natural glow. This was something older, something wrong. My mind screamed at me to turn around, to run, but my body felt rooted, as if the land itself was holding me in place, unwilling to let me leave. After managing to escape the eerie procession and the terrifying scene, the night stretched on unnaturally. The moon was barely visible, just a sliver in the sky. The air felt nevertheless of oppressive on all sides. It felt as though the oppressive darkness of the graveyard was still moving. asked after a long stretch of silence. His voice was barely a whisper, as if he too was trying to make sense of what had happened. I couldn't help but let out a shaky breath. I don't know, man. It felt real. Too real. I tightened my grip on the handlebar, my palms sweating. The way they moved those faces, their eyes. It was like they weren't really there. Not anymore. My friend nodded silently, his face pale under the dim light. Yeah, it was like they were stuck, like they were trapped. We didn't speak for the rest of the ride. I could feel the weight of those words hanging in the air between us, and the quietness of the road only seemed to make everything feel worse. It was as if the very road we were on was part of the nightmare. Finally, we arrived at the edge of town. The familiar sight of my house, the normality of it, almost seemed jarring after everything we had just experienced. It felt like we were stepping into a different world, one that was untouched by whatever we had just seen. But even as I parked the scooter and dismounted, that heaviness in the air didn't lift. It lingered. "You good?" my friend asked, his voice filled with concern. I nodded, though my legs felt shaky beneath me. I was far from good. The terror I felt hadn't gone away. I just wanted to get inside, away from everything. The next day, I found myself at the church, needing answers. The priest needed to tell me what was going on. What was that procession? Why did it feel like something was following me? I had to know. The church was on the edge of town, an old building that had been there for as long as I could remember. The stone walls were weathered, cracked by time, and the air smelled like incense and dust. The place was mostly empty, save for a few people sitting in the pews, heads bowed in prayer. I found Father Augustine near the altar. The man was older than I remembered, his face lined with years of wisdom, maybe even suffering. His eyes were kind but sharp, as though he had seen things he wasn't supposed to. His presence was calming, but when he saw my face, I knew something was wrong. "You look troubled, my son," he said, his voice full of concern. I didn't know how to start. How could I even explain what I had seen? But I told him everything: the torches, the procession, the cold whispers that seemed to come from the trees. His face grew more somber with every word, until by the end, his hands were trembling. He gripped the edge of the altar, as if the very story I had told was weighing him down. "This is not the first time I've heard of such things," he whispered. "Many years ago, a young man came to me, saying he had seen the same procession. He spoke to them, asked them what they were doing. The next morning, his body was found, lifeless. His face was twisted in terror. He crossed himself, his fingers trembling. They are lost souls, those who died with unfinished business, souls who never achieved what they wanted in life. Now they wander, searching for something they lost. If you had spoken to them or interfered in any way, you wouldn't be here today." His words hit me like a cold wave. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The terror I had felt on the road suddenly made sense, but it didn't make me feel any safer. Father Augustine's voice seemed to fade as he continued talking, but I couldn't focus anymore. My mind was spinning. I had narrowly escaped whatever those people were, and I had a feeling they weren't done with me. I don't remember how I ended up in the hospital. One moment I was at home, trying to shake off the lingering fear from the night before, and the next I was waking up in a sterile, white room. The scent of antiseptic filled the air, and the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor was the only sound that cut through the silence. When I opened my eyes, my friend was sitting beside me, looking pale and exhausted. As soon as he saw me stir, he rushed over. "You're awake. Man, you had us worried," he said, his voice full of panic. "You weren't responding when I tried to wake you up last night. I didn't know what to do." tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, like I was made of stone. Then I saw my hands, my palms and fingers were covered in faint burn marks, like I had been holding something scalding in my sleep. The burns weren't severe, but the outlines of them looked unnatural.